Good evening, everyone. This is Tommy Lawhorn back with South River Fly Shop After Hours podcast. Tonight we'll be talking about part 2 of streamers, advanced streamer tactics, bigger flies, that sort of thing. Have Dylan with me tonight.
Hello, everybody. And today we're going to be going over, advanced streamer tactics. So let's kind of get right into this with the gear that we recommend. So when we're talking about this idea of advanced streamer tactics, we're talking about larger patterns, stuff like we have here in this box, something
more aggressive.
More aggressive. In the last one, we talked more single hook, sub 4-inch flies. Now we're talking above 6, right? We're looking at 6 to 9, something along those lines.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to have some 4 to 6 inch flies in there too.
Yeah, we're still going to have some larger flies, but I think the idea more is that they're going to be heavier. So we have to have appropriate gear to handle these patterns. A lot of the time what we find ourselves using are 6 to 8 weights. I know with your trip you'll probably be throwing some 9 weights here. Appropriate lines, your sink tips, the differences in all of these things. We're going to get into all of that.
And most of this would also apply if you were getting into your 10s and 11s for like big stripers or muskie.
Yeah.
Getting into the real big stuff, plus 10-inch flies. A lot of these same tactics are going to be the same ones you're using.
Yeah, I think we're going to be talking. Yeah, we're going to be talking trout specifically.
We're talking trouty smallmouthy.
Yeah, trouty smallmouthy. Yeah, for sure.
So as Dylan mentioned, I'm getting ready to leave in the morning for the White River down in Arkansas, and the box in front of you is kind of the big stuff that I've got tied up for that trip, anywhere from 6 to 9 inch long flies. And the gear that we're going to be using is going to be 7 to 9 weight rods with full sinking lines, partial sinking lines, sink tip lines. So that there's a lot to the gear thing. This isn't your average trout gear.
No.
Your 7 weight smallmouth rod might be a perfectly adequate on this, and it might even be right on the nose. If it's a faster action 7 weight with a couple of different sink rate lines, that's going to do a lot of this. It won't do the 9-inch stuff well, but it'll do the 4 to 6-inch stuff well. Yeah. So that 6, 7, 8 is really kind of where we're at most of the time. But if you're throwing a 9-inch fly all day, it's much easier on a 9 than it is on a 7.
Yeah. I think you already just kind of said it, but like the rod has to be a faster rod, a stiffer rod.
Faster action rods with a little faster tip in the rod is typically going to be your best bet. You don't want a real flexy tip here for a lot of reasons. One, you're going to be, like, if your rod tip in the water, you're going to be kind of limiting how hard you can strip set. If that rod flexes real hard when you strip, you could lose some of the power of your set. Whether that rod tip's above the water or below the water, if the rod's not directly in line with the fly, the tip moves too much, you're going to lose some power on your hook set.
Yeah.
So there's that stiffer tipped, faster action fly rods. There's a lot of good ones out on the market. I really love the Echo Streamer X for a $550 rod. That's a really good one.
I'm a big fan.
And it comes in 6 weight through 8 weight. It's a rod designed for this type of fishing.
Yeah, it suits it so well. Also going into this stiffer rod tip thing, we're also looking for this in the rods because we want to be able to animate our flies. We want to have that connection. If you're throwing a moderate action rod or just, it's not that you can't animate a fly on fiberglass, but it's not going to do the job right.
When you move the rod tip, you've got to recover the rod tip in order to set the hook.
Yes.
So, the quicker that rod tip comes back to recovery, the more efficient your hook set's going to be.
Yeah.
Because often the fish are going to take on that erratic motion.
Yeah. And then we've kind of got, do you want to talk about the different ways to present them? We're talking more now, we're going to get more into articulated stuff at the moment.
Yeah, so your flies that you're throwing are going to be, from your full-size sex dungeon, Kelly Gallup pattern, your brush head deceivers, your double deceivers. They're all kind of category flies.
Yeah.
Some are made to be more profile, like a double deceiver or a Gallup's bangtail is more of a thin fly with a tall profile, whereas a brush head or something like that is more of a pushy fly with a bigger, rounder profile. Chocolate's T-bone is another example of that, used for musky fishing, or a Buford.
Yeah.
Something with a bulkier head, a more round head, full round of the hook, or the eye of the hook, and that's going to give you a lot more push. When you see that big round head there, that's going to give you a lot more pushing water. That's going to make the fly move side to side to some degree, but it's also going to make the fly, when you pause between strips, it's going to make that fly stall really quickly. Because unless you've got a steady pressure on that fly pulling it through the water, it's wanting to stop. It's like putting the brakes on. So that head of that fly is going to stop, and the tail is trying to go forward, is going to kick. Or the segmentations of that fly are going to kick to one side or the other. Oftentimes that's very reminiscent of a dying bait fish or a wounded bait fish, wounded other fish. And when we're talking about 6 to 9 inch flies, that could be another trout.
Yeah.
That could be a game fish, not just a bait fish.
Yeah. It's very common for them to try and eat each other,
Oh,
right?
absolutely. I'm a big guy, you're a little guy, you fit.
Yep.
So the action of the fly is part of the game, and how you strip the fly and how you present the fly is another part.
Let's talk a little bit more about that same idea, the action of these flies. Why are we throwing the flies that we are, and what do they do in the water?
So your slimmer profile flies, your flies that are built more like this, are cutting through the water much better, and they often do kick as well, and they'll stall and kick as well, but they're going to give a wider profile in the water column for more visibility. They're also going to give a little different kick on the animation or on the articulation than a bulkhead fly, or a larger head pushy fly. And that pushy fly, when you strip and stop, it stops, and it will fold.
Yeah.
On the kick. I mean, it will fold 90 degrees on the kick. That's they're kind of two different actions. Now, it is still a bulky profile, but it is a more round profile in the water versus a flatter profile. So from an angle, this could be less visible than this. And that's really the best way to describe it.
Yeah.
If that fly is coming across the current at an angle, a taller pattern can be visible further away than a rounder pattern.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, we're looking at the width vertically of the fly.
Yes.
Yeah. Versus what it might look like if, I don't want to call them tubular. That's not really the right way to put it.
No, they're in the round.
They're in, yeah, I would give it that.
And that's an old terminology that dates back to the Joe Brooks days. Back in the old Sports Afield and Outdoor Life, before there were fly fishing magazines. But the second part of gear, though, is, like we've said before, reels aren't as important. They're getting more important as we get into big fish like this, and sometimes we're talking double-digit pound fish, not just double-digit inch fish. There's a big difference between a 20-inch brown and a 10-pound brown. A drag becomes a lot more important. A good drag becomes a lot more important. So your reels typically are a step up in quality from stuff you would need for trout. Even if you were steelhead fishing, I would want to step up in quality from a trout reel. And your lines, that's where everything comes down to having the right sink rates. Because some of these flies are weighted, but even the weighted flies they have a lot of material on them. So they're not easy to sink. Even a Dungeon with a lead dumbbell eye on the front of it is a bulky fly. That dumbbell eye is not going to just make it plummet to the bottom. So you're going to need help to get it deeper than, now sometimes you do want to fish it on a floating line.
Yeah.
But if you're fishing some bigger water, where you're fishing, over 6 to 8 foot drop offs, more than 4 foot of depth, you're going to want some type of sink tip, or a full sinking fly, up to a full sinking fly line. So my setup for this trip, I'm going to be running 3 spools, for one reel. I'm going to have a type 7, type 8 full sink, 24 to 30 feet of full sink, and then an intermediate running line. So that whole line, there's nothing floating on it. So when I'm casting 50, 60 feet to a pocket on the bank and ripping that fly off the bank, the line is actually getting down before the fly does. It's thinner, it's easier for it to sink. I'm pulling the fly down through the water column off the bank. And that gets that fly to that depth a whole lot quicker, especially if you're fishing high flows. On these big tailwaters where you're typically going to find these large, giant brown trout and big rainbows, a lot of times you're fishing streamers on a pulse release from a dam.
Yeah.
You're fishing them on a generation schedule when they're generating and running more water down the river. That can be 1,000 CFS more than normal. That can be 8 or 10,000 CFS more than normal. So that could be 1.5 feet higher water than normal. That can be 6 or 7 feet higher water than normal.
Right.
And so getting that fly to come off of that bank not straight down, but as down into the depths as quickly as possible, very important. If you're fishing more in that 4 to 6 foot deep, you're probably going to be something a little less aggressive. Maybe still a full sinking line, like a type 3 full sink with an intermediate running line, or a type 3 or type 6 sink tip, 10 or 15 foot, and to a floating line. There's a lot of different things you can do there, but like I say, my setup on this trip, I'm going to have that type 7 full sink. I'm going to have a triple density with a intermediate sink 3, sink 5. So I'm going to have at the fly end of that fly line, it's going to be a 5 inch per second, blending into a 3 inch per second, blending into an intermediate on the running line. That's going to be better for, say 4 to 6 foot deep water, where you're coming off the bank and you got to get the fly down into that 4 to 6 foot range. If I don't need to get past 4 feet, I may have more of a float intermediate sink 3, like a triple density there, or just a 10 or 15 foot type 3 sink tip with a floating head behind it. So it really is based on how much water you have. And when we say type 3 or sink 3 or type 7 or sink 7 or sink 8, those are kind of the same thing. A type 7 is basically 7 inch per second. It's a sink rate. It's pretty heavy. You don't see much beyond type 8. So your sink rate is based off of dead still water. It's not based off of current. So in a lake, Sink 3 is 3 inches per second. Sink 8 is 8 inches per second. Just straight fall. If you're in current, you're going to go up a size generally. So if you're in 4 to 6 foot of water in current, you might still need a type 6. Probably don't need a type 8.
Yeah.
But you might still need a type 6. Depends on how fast that current is. If it's slower current, your type 3 is probably fine.
Yeah.
So the line types really do matter. And a heavy enough line to, of course, cast the size of fly. That's where we're talking that 6 to 9 weight range. And really more 7s and 8s is kind of the sweet spot.
Yeah. 6 is...
6 is low.
It's low, but it gets you rolling. I'm thinking very specifically Virginia. It's not something I would take on a much larger tailwater like the white.
Or the South Holston or the
no.
Watauga.
No.
Those can get some pretty unruly flows.
Yeah, that would be 7s, 8s for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And even the Jackson here in Virginia or the Smith here in Virginia, if it's closer to 1,000 CFS flow, you're going to be using those heavier rods and you're going to be using those heavier lines.
Yeah.
Those rivers in that 1,000 CFS range, you need to get down. The current, it's not so much the depth, it's the current speed.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, we're throwing 7s and 8s on the Jackson when it's like that, especially when they're actually releasing. So. And
we're throwing those 7s and 8s when we're throwing for early season smallmouth as well on the Shenandoah or the James, because it's slower current, but it's deeper water. Now we're fishing slower current, but 6 to 10 foot deep water, for those pre-spawn smallmouth.
Right.
So it's really the same game there.
Let's fit in this one real quick. Just throw knots in.
Maybe start with leaders.
Start with leaders? Yeah, let's start with leaders. So when it comes to leaders, we were talking about this earlier, and I was thinking about those sink tips, not full sink lines really, but like poly leaders. With the poly leaders, I'm adding in that 4 foot section of 10 to 12 pound. But if we're talking an actual sinking line, we are building a leader out for that line.
Yes.
Something that's still going to taper down, and you take that one. We were talking about it cutting your line, and that can be some issues.
So when you're typically on our modern lines, there's going to be a loop welded on the front of the line. You can cut that loop off and do an Albright knot to nylon or something else, but or a nail knot. But typically those lines are going to have a loop on them. You're going to have a loop-to-loop connection to your leader or tippet section and then to your fly. And with a full sink line, we don't want a real long leader. 4 to 6 foot is pretty much where we're going to be. If we're being more aggressive, we might even be as short as 3 feet.
Yeah.
But because that coated tipped fly line is looped back on itself, we don't want to cut through the coating and cut into the core with that stiff nylon loop going to our leader. So we want a heavier butt on those leaders. Now that might be, my formula is generally about a foot of 25 pound, maybe even 30 pound, about a foot of 20, say 25, 20, maybe a foot and a half of 20, and then about 2 to 3 feet of 15 for these big flies.
Right.
That way I've got enough nylon thickness at the butt that I'm not cutting into the coating on a hard strip or on a hard fighting fish or even on a hard hook set, that thin, say 10 pound or 12 pound or 0x or 2x, if I just made a 4 foot section of 0x or 2x with a loop on the end of it and loop that to the end of that coated fly line, that thin diameter material is going to cut right through the coating into the core. That could break the core and cost you a good fish and a messed up fly line that you got to fix.
Right.
So a short tapered leader with the tippet diameter, the final diameter, matching the size fly you're going to throw. My general rule of thumb is that 4-inch, 5-inch fly, you can get away with 10 pound or like 2x. 1X or 2X. If you're in that 6 to 7 inch fly, or even 9 inch fly, 8 or 9 inch fly, I'm not going to be less than about 15 pounds on that tippet. Those are big eyes. That's big wire on the hook. You want a good strong tippet there, and you're fishing a big moving fly. They're not looking at tippet.
Right.
You're not worried about them seeing your leader. So when we're talking about leaders, we're also going to be talking about the knot that we're going to use to attach that fly. But we're also talking about the knots we're using to build the leader.
Right.
Since we're building a tapered leader. You can buy 4-foot and 6-foot streamer leaders from a lot of these companies that are extruded tapered leaders. Most people are not going to do that. Most people are going to tie their own.
Yeah.
And a blood knot or a triple surgeon's knot to connect your sections is fine. Unless you're musky fishing where you're going to strip way in and figure eight that fly, where you're wanting those knots to be real smooth going through the guides, where that fly's only a foot from the tip of the rod. You don't really strip that fly all the way. You'll strip it back to the boat, but you're not, or to your feet, but you're not really stripping that fly, that leader, into the tip of the rod. So it's smooth fly line in the tip of the rod.
Right.
You're not really worried about your knots there. So if you're going 25, 20, 15, a triple surgeon's knot, a blood knot, whichever you like the best. That's giving you a good strength with the material you're using. I like fluorocarbon all the way, but there's plenty of people out there that fish nylon all the way. That's just your preference there. Nylon's certainly going to cost you a lot less.
Yeah.
But that being said, I do like fluorocarbon. I tie all of my leaders in that generally 25, 20, 15 out of fluorocarbon. And I use a triple surgeon's knot. It's a good strong knot for connecting two different diameters. It doesn't fail. So, and then the knot to the fly.
Yeah, we've got a couple different options.
There's
here.
a couple of options there, but really there's one.
Yeah.
And that's the non-slip loop knot.
Yeah.
We want a ring knot that's not tightening down on the eye, because we want, when that fly stalls, for it to be able to move on the end of the tippet. And also when it's just being pulled through the water by the current, say on the swing or something like that, where the whole fly can wiggle, there's not a stiff connection to the leader. You can use a clinch knot. You can use a double Davy knot if you want a tight connection to the eye of the fly. But when you make a tight connection to the eye of the fly, a snug knot against the eye, you are limiting the movement of the fly.
Yes. Yeah, it definitely has a place. Like, I know we were talking about jig streamers in the last one.
Yeah.
That's its place, really.
That's really it. And if you're really hopping a streamer across the bottom, like a really heavy crawfish style streamer, which is also kind of a jig streamer.
Yeah.
You're
Similar action.
You're better with a tighter knot, with that tight to the eye knot. But a non-slip loop knot on an activated fly is really the choice.
Yeah, for sure. I think that kind of covers knots. Let's talk about the hook sets.
So, probably in my opinion, the most important part of the hook set is where your rod is before you set.
Yeah.
You can't have the rod tip out parallel to the water. You can't have it above parallel to the water, and really actively get a good strip set. And the hook set for most of this streamer fishing is going to be less rod, more strip.
Right.
It's going to be more of a straight inline hook set. The best way to do that is have your rod tip low, directly in line with the angle that the line is penetrating the water, or even have the rod tip under the water to help the fly get deeper. Depending on what you're doing.
Right.
If you're fishing big, fast flows, you're probably going to have that rod tip under the water. If you're fishing more normal flows, that 4 to 6 foot depth. You don't need the rod tip under the water to get the fly to the level you want it, but you're still going to have that rod tip within 6 inches to a foot of the surface of the water. It's not going to be deep. So when you're making that hook set, you're either going to see the fish take the fly, which that's one of the great things about streamer fishing is we're fishing a big enough fly, we're seeing it come through the water most of the time. Now sometimes when it's 6 to 8 feet deep, we're not seeing it, we're feeling it. But we're going to see that fish take, or we're going to feel that fish take, and we're going to set hard on just like a hard long strip. That's going to be your best hook set 99% of the time.
Right.
After the hook set, we can bring that rod tip up, we can put that side pressure on, we can do whatever we need to do to fight that fish. But until we have that hook buried, we're not doing anything.
Right. We can talk about a little bit here. I know we're doing more articulated, bigger streamer stuff, but we do at least have some need to talk about maybe setting hooks when you're swinging flies. Now that we covered that more in the last one, there is kind of two options. One, you can lean towards a bit more. I would say you almost don't have to. A lot of the time they're going to get that hook.
I'm not a proponent of setting the hook on a fly that is engaged in motion with the line coming across, swinging fly. You can swing these big streamers,
right,
and they will catch fish just dead swing. They're going to swim some. They're not going to kick like they would if we were jerk stripping or engaging the rod tip, but they will catch fish on the swing. And on the swing, that fish does the work for you. Really, your best option on the swing is let the fish eat. Come tight when he's taking line. And you want to come tight. I like to come tight to the inside. Whichever bank I'm on, come tight to the bank. If I'm on the right side of the river, I'm going to come to the right. If I'm on the left side of the river, I'm going to come to the left. I want to try to get that fish out of the current into the easy side. And generally, if I'm on the right side of the river, it's because that's the easy side to wade. If I'm on the left side of the river, that's the easy side to wade. So I'm trying to get that fish, his head turned, out of the stronger current. Anytime you're fighting a bigger fish in stronger current, you're not in control of the situation.
Right. For sure. Yeah, I've had some run down pretty far on me.
Yeah,
so far below me, I can't believe I managed to catch them.
Yeah, and depending on, if you're in a boat drifting down the river, a lot easier to catch up with that fish. If you're in knee to thigh deep water, waist deep water, trying to chase it down, you're gonna get hurt.
Yeah, for sure. We kind of covered a little bit of it, but let's go a little deeper on retrieves.
Where the cast lands is probably the first part of that.
Yeah, so not just retrieves, you're right. Where it lands. I meant to say, let's go deeper on presenting and retrieves. So let's talk about the presentation first.
So in normal flows, we're going to be looking for drop-offs. We're going to be looking for the same things we were looking for with smaller streamers. We're going to be looking for that midstream boulder in deeper water with edges. We're going to be looking for a ledge drop-off or a gravel bar drop-off. Feeding stations, basically, or resting stations for these fish. And that pretty much eliminates casting to the bank unless that happens to be like a hard bend in the river or something like that where that particular feature is over next to the bank. A lot of times this is going to be more in the river, mid-river type structure. We're casting to that general area. We want to retrieve the fly across or through that feature.
Right.
The retrieves are going to vary, and you should vary your retrieves. You shouldn't just, unless you find that one retrieve is working that day and no other. But a strip pause, a strip pause, a short strip, a long strip, you're going to be varying everything there to some degree. Generally, the bigger the fly goes, the longer I'm going to make that strip. If I'm fishing a 4 to 6 inch fly, my strips are probably in the 8 to 10 inch range. Boom, 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 or boom, boom, pause. If I'm fishing a 6 to 8, 9 inch fly, it's going to be more of like a 1.5 feet, maybe even 2 foot long. Pretty big strips. Your arm will get sore from stripping, along with your arm that you're casting with.
Yeah.
That's probably the main retrieve that's out there, is some form of strip pause on these bigger articulated streamers. A steady strip can be effective. That's more of a swimmy fly type motion, and we'll talk about swimmy flies later. We're really talking about these kicky style articulated flies that are designed to fold and kick. The opposite of that would be, we're fishing higher flows. The fish are getting pushed out of that mid-river structure because it's just too much current there. They're looking for bigger current breaks, huge rocks. A big rock out in the river could be enough of a current break that's still above the water. But a lot of times that's going to be cuts on the bank or logs on the bank, hard cover along the banks. And it's going to be mostly boat style fishing at that point. And we're going to try to get that fly to almost hit the bank.
Right.
I mean, 6 inches to a foot off the bank is kind of ideal there. Is it always possible? No. But we're shooting for getting that fly as close to the bank as possible, because there's a lot of current, and that little pocket might only be a couple feet deep that fish is sitting in. So we got to get that fly to hit the water and get that fish to react right away. So getting the fly into that little pocket, accuracy is very important. Being able to cast at different distances accurately is very important. I can't stress enough, and I'm guilty of it. You get a little tired. You've made 500 casts, and it's the end of the day, but you still got some good water up against that bank on a high flow. You got to get that fly in there. You've got to take your time. You've got to load the rod. You've got to make that 45, 50-foot cast to a foot off the bank. That's it. If you want to be successful at this, it's going to hurt a little bit.
Yeah. I like one thing you said earlier. You said reactionary. Let's throw in just a quick bit just about these reaction-based and food-based bites.
So a food-based bite, we talked about a lot more in the last episode.
Yeah.
A food-based bite is, that fish is engaged in feeding behavior already. Water temperatures, prime, the metabolism is firing, they need food. They're going to try to consume the best calories they can for the least amount of work. Whether that be minnows, crayfish, a big school of minnows kind of flitting back and forth across a ledge, they come up and eat one. They come up and eat one. They come up and eat one. Uh-huh. Your food-based eat is really efficient. There's no extra energy expended by the fish. They wait until it's close, they eat it.
Right.
A reactionary bite is it's really a totally different thing.
Yeah.
I mean, it is, maybe that fish is, I won't say dormant, but he's kind of lethargic. He's already got a full belly, or it's cold water and doesn't need a lot of big meals. But you're trying to get that fish to engage even when he's not super hungry. Mostly, to some degree, it's an invader. It's, why are you in my territory? I'm going to hit you.
Yeah, in my mind, it's something that pisses him off.
It's that, or it's too big a meal, too easy to pass up.
Yeah.
And these big flies can do both of those things. They can be, that 6 to 8 inch long, 9 inch long fly can be that you're in my territory. I'm going to hit you. It can also be, oh, you're a good sized meal and you're wounded. I'm going to eat you. I don't need the calories right now. I'm going to get them. So I think the reactionary bite is more of you getting the fly so close to that fish in such an engaging manner that they just hammer out at it.
Yeah.
And a lot of times that's what they do on that bite isn't efficient.
No.
It's a 2 or 3 foot lunge, over the top, crushing that fly. I mean, they're expending some energy, but they know they kill it, they got it. They're going to get that. They're going to get those calories back, and then some.
Yeah.
Picking your target for where you're casting, I think is a big part. Seeing that linear bank and that little cup, there's going to be a little bit of a back eddy in that cup. Now that cup might only be 2 or 3 foot wide. It could be 6 or 8 foot wide and a bigger back eddy. But in high flows, that's a great ambush spot for a fish to sit in there pretty easy. Not a lot of current messing with it, maybe even a reverse current on a back eddy helping it sit there. And it's easy to swing out, grab something, swing back in. And when you're in those prime water temperature flows, in that 45 to 60 degree, 48 to 60 degree range where that metabolism's really on fire, and they're not just getting out of the current, they're getting out of the current with the intent of using the current to find more food.
Yeah.
In colder temperatures, it's not, it's still important to hit that target, but in that prime feeding temperature, it's really important to hit those little targets. So again, accuracy at distance with a big fly, and practice, lots and lots of practice. A day on the water could be 500 to 1,000 cast.
Easily. I mean, man, if you're doing a float, it's going to vary on how long the float is, but I think the one I did, or the few that I've done now, if they're 6 to 10 miles, I mean, you're going to easily get 1,000 casts out.
You're going to make a lot of casts. You're making a lot of casts with a heavyweight rod, with a heavy line, with a big fly.
And in quick succession. You need to be on top of it.
And there are times, like when we're fishing big flows on a big tailwater, on a generation schedule or something like that, where you're fishing that fly from the bank 20, 30 feet out before you're going to fish that fly nearly back to you before you're picking it up and making another cast. When we say quick is relative to how long the cast was and how long the retrieve is. There's times when we're floating the Jackson tailwater and we've got, a 20-foot cast to the bank, and we're only going to make 6 or 7 strips and pauses, and we're going to try to get that fly out of the water and get it back to the next target because we're not on this huge river. We don't have 30-foot retrieves, 25, 30-foot retrieves. We've got 8 or 10-foot retrieves.
Yeah, I was going to kind of say that, but you kind of covered it. It is that we want to be in and out. We're not looking for a false cast, a ton of them. If
No.
you throw 1 or 2 because you're trying to aim, I understand, but we really want to be out and you want to be back in.
Yeah. If we have made a 30-foot retrieve and we've only got 10, 15 feet of fly line out, you're going to need 1 false cast to extend that line to get that full 50, 60-foot cast back.
For sure.
But if we're making that same 25, 30-foot cast to the bank on a smaller river or over structure in the middle of the river in normal flows, we want to make those 5 or 6 strips, get the fly up to the surface, pick it up, send it to the next target.
Exactly.
No false cast.
And the lines that we're using...
load the rods pretty quickly.
Yeah, they load the rods really quickly. It makes this easier than it sounds, for sure.
You're shooting line a lot.
Yeah.
You're hauling to some degree, whether it's a single haul on the pickup or a double haul. You are hauling some, but a 90-foot cast, while feasible, probably isn't very effective.
Yeah.
but that 40 to 60 foot range is very important. On the bigger rivers, on stuff the size of, if you're here in Virginia, you've seen the James River, you've seen the main stem of the Shenandoah or the New River. On rivers that size, those 40 to 60 foot casts are very important. On a river the size of the Jackson or the Maury or way up on the South Fork of the Shenandoah, you're probably going to be more in the 30, 40 foot range most of the time. You're not going to be in that 40 to 60.
Yeah.
So you're not going to be making as long a cast or as long a retrieves. Your retrieve's going to be more target focused to where you think the fish is going to be. That soft spot, that easy spot to sit.
Yeah. This is still relative to it, but not even just on big rivers. Let's say you're wading. It's not as fast action as your floats would be. But even on your smaller rivers, you do want to hit your spots. You want to hit those banks and that cover. If it is running higher, I mean, you can still take all of these ideas and apply them to smaller water. You're not limited to fishing these larger streamers on big bodies of water.
No.
You can still use this stuff.
I have a good friend who lives in near the Black Hills in South Dakota. Those streams are creeks.
Yeah.
But they've got a lot of fish in them, and some of them have some really big fish in them. And he will go out and fish 6-inch long streamers in a 20-foot wide creek in high flows.
Yeah, it's fun.
And he catches some nice fish, and he finds a lot of fish that way. Maybe doesn't catch them, but he finds kind of where they live.
Yeah, we talked about that a little in the last. It's great for searching.
And even if you don't get that fish to eat, if you know where he lives, you got more chances at him.
Yeah.
So that big streamer, I mean, I've fished these 6 and 7-inch flies on the south here.
Yeah.
And that's not a big river. It's average probably 30 foot wide.
Pretty much.
The fishing them to those obvious current, easy places to sit, drop-offs, ledges, pockets in the bank, back eddies. Those targets are all the same. They're going to be smaller. May not be as many of them.
You will have more time to hit them.
You will have more time to hit them, especially if you're wade fishing. You're not being carried by the current down the river in a boat. So you're going to have your feet planted, and you'll have more you can, if you didn't make what you thought was the best presentation the first time, give it another shot.
Yeah.
Get that fly to where that fish that should be there, you think is there, has a chance to see it.
Yeah.
If they don't see it, they're not going to react to it.
Yeah, and we're talking fast and rapid for most of this, but you totally have a chance to slow down in some situations.
You certainly can. I mean, a fly like and we'll talk a little bit more about flies now, but a fly like a sextungeon, with a dumbbell eye, with a bulky deer hair head, I mean, we can fish that fly fast, and it's going to kick. It's got an articulated body, and it's going to kick on the paws. But we can also slow that fly down and hop it. We will get hung up some, and streamers aren't cheap. They're not quick to tie. Most of these articulated flies, a fast tire is going to be somewhere in the 15-20 minute range on a fly. An average tire is going to be somewhere between 30 minutes and an hour per fly.
Yeah.
So even if you're tying them yourself, you've got $10-20 a fly invested in these flies. And if you're buying them on the cheap end, you're in the $7-8 range per fly. Could be $12-15 per fly, depending on the size of the fly. So you have to be comfortable with the fact you're going to lose them.
It happens to all of us. Trees are hell.
Big underwater logs and fast current, man, they will tear you up. They will rob you of flies really fast.
Yeah.
Because you bury a 4-aught or a 3-aught or even a 2-aught hook in wet bark of a tree that's underwater in 6 foot, 7 foot deep in current, you ain't getting it back. You'll wreck the boat trying to get it back.
Yeah. Well, other than wrecking boats, let's talk about some of the flies now. So I have some questions, or at least I got one. I'm not gonna talk about the question quite yet. We'll get to that in a little later. But he was talking about game changers and swim flies.
So most of what I have here and what I fish a lot is more of that articulated jerk bait style fly. If you fished conventional, you know what a jerk bait is.
Yeah.
I think most people kind of know what a jerk bait is. You know, it's a fly that is erratic in its motion when it's being retrieved. It's gonna have some articulation to it when it pauses, or some sideways motion, something when it's paused, a slight slow fall. So a jerk bait style fly. A swim based fly is tied more like a game changer. There's a lot more articulations in that fly, short, small articulations, small body segments, put together in a tapered shape like a minnow or a bait fish or a shad. Something that tends to be a fast moving bait, that bait balls or schools of mid-size. A lot of game changers for trout and smallmouth are in that 4 to 6 inch range. They're flies that, because of all those segments in the body, they do this on a steady retrieve. Larger head, tapering down, each one of those segments is getting a little smaller, and it just wants to swim like a fish. So a more steady retrieve for those types of flies. We talked about a jerk strip or we talked about strip pause. We probably didn't talk enough about a jerk strip, but I'll come back to that. The swimmy fly is better on a steady retrieve, just steady strip, or even a two-hand. Tuck the rod under your arm and you're stripping with both. You're release, grab, release, grab, release, grab. You're keeping that fly as smooth a speed as possible through the water.
Yeah, constantly moving.
Constant speed, not speeding up, not slowing down, not pausing. Or you're actually using the current to help you do that.
Yeah.
That fly is going to do the same thing on the swing. But you still don't want to do that jerk strip or that quick bump. You want to do everything smooth. If it's swinging through the current, you make a long, smooth pull to get it to go a little faster. So the swimmy fly is a little different because it's imitating a live and healthy, just moving across the river bait.
Right.
A school of shad, a shad that got away from the school, a bigger minnow that got away from the school. It's really a different imitation.
Yeah.
I think that swimmy flies, they work for everything, no doubt. I think they work better in situations where you have pelagic style fish like striped bass that are more inclined to chase their food because they're always moving anyway.
Right.
Where you have the trout can be very sedentary. I mean, a trout can sit on the pillow in front of that boulder in the midstream for hours and only reach out and grab what comes in close enough.
Yeah.
That's never going to happen with striped bass. They're always moving. So I think that swimmy style fly, in my personal purview, I've caught fish on them, I've caught plenty of trout on them, but they're not my first choice.
Yeah, I don't fish them a whole lot. I prefer like what we have here in the box.
If I've got a school of shad blowing up out on the lake and there's stripers under them, I want a swimmy fly. I want that constant motion swimming that fly through them.
For sure.
But I can catch them on that jerkbait style fly in that situation too. So, it just depends. They're all effective.
I think maybe you're just limited in patterns when it comes to swim flies.
You really are kind of limited in patterns. That Game Changer platform has been the best platform for that style of fly to ever come out.
Yeah.
It's really kind of the best way to make that fly work, or that type of presentation work. I didn't talk a lot about activating the rod tip on the strip pause. When we're fishing a big fly 7 or 8 foot deep, you really can't move that fly side to side. But when we're fishing a 4 to 6 inch fly in 3 to 5 foot of water, we can keep that rod tip above the water, and when we strip, we can move the rod tip and return it. Now we're getting that fly to do this and then this. More like, changing directions and kicking and pausing and doing all those same things, flaring up on the pause, tail kick. But we're getting that fly to leave the straight line and change directions more frequently. The key there, though, is not these big, huge motions. Your rod tip is pointed at the fly. As you strip, you bring the rod tip away. Before you make the next strip, the rod tip is back in straight line.
Yeah.
To the other side, back to the same side. Really, really a lot of options there, but it's not a huge motion. If you're moving the rod tip more than about a foot either side, the motion's too big and you're not going to return back in time. You're going to get slack to the fly.
And, we are staying connected to these patterns. That's how we detect that take, that hit, whatever the case may be. You have to be connected to it. If you have slack in your line, you're going to miss fish. You're not going to feel them. You might see them depending on, what the water's doing that day, but we have to be connected to it.
Yeah, if you strip and make a 3 foot wide motion with the rod tip, by the time you return back to pointing to make that next strip, there's at least a foot of slack that fish could hit the fly, release the fly, and you never feel it.
Right.
And even if you did feel it, you've got to take that foot of slack out before you ever touch that fish with the hook. Are you going to get a good hook set? Probably not.
Are you really going to be able to do it in time at all?
You probably are going to feel it and miss that fish.
Yeah. And, there's so many efficient ways to fish streamers, and but they all rely on tension.
And again, with that, we were talking about the stiff-tipped rods. If the tip of your rod flexes a lot when you do that, when you strip and try to move the fly to the right or to the left, and the tip of the rod flexes a lot, that's introducing slack too.
Yeah.
So no matter how quick you come back to straight for that set, you're getting slack between you and the fly.
Yeah.
And it could cost you feeling that fish, or you could feel the fish and still not be able to get the hook set.
Exactly. And, these, like the jerk strip, it works so well with your articulated patterns. It makes you animate the fly so much better with it.
Well, we talked about that wider profile earlier.
Yeah.
Visibility from a distance. Even with a little round profile, like a sextuntion's a pretty round, small profile.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a sub 1 inch profile fly. But if we take that fly from a straight line jerk strip to a foot to the right, a foot to the left, to a 2 foot wide, we're making that fly more visible at more distance to more fish.
Yeah. I think we can...
We're also keeping it further away from us with each strip, but still tight to it. You're not bringing it closer to you, as close to you with each strip as you would be with a straight line strip.
Yeah.
Yeah, a straight line 1 foot strip is bringing the fly a foot closer to you. To the side 1 foot strip is moving it over there, and then it's coming back over here. It takes it longer to get back to you. So you're fishing the fly through that good cover longer.
Right. Just kind of breaking away from the articulated or swim fly thing. This same idea applies to your jig streamers as well. We do want tension. We want to be animating with the rod tip more than anything. And it's the same thing. You want tension to feel those fish or detect your strikes. And that's the best way to animate them. It really translates into all of your streamer fishing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mentioned the white a couple times.
Yeah. We're excited.
Because I'm, going to be rolling out of Waynesboro probably pre 5 a.m. tomorrow morning with a 13, 14-hour drive ahead of me down to caught her in Mountain Home, Arkansas. But there are some great destinations for large streamer fishing here in the east and out west.
Yeah.
You know, you don't have to drive 14 hours to get to good streamer fishing. The Jackson River here in Virginia for trout. The Smith River doesn't have as many big trout. It has a lot of 12-inch category brown trout where you wouldn't be fishing as big of flies. But there are some bigger fish there. If you want to only catch one fish per day, you can certainly do this on the Smith. There's there's some guys that do that. It's not a river I spend much time on, but the Jackson, some of the stock trout waters,
Yep.
like the Bull Pasture, that are a little bit bigger rivers that do stay cold enough in a lot of places for trout to hold over, and for a few wild fish to exist. Not a lot, not a really sustainable population, so to speak, but there are a few wild fish in some of these rivers. Those can be great destinations to learn about, even if you're not catching a lot of fish, practicing and learning those different techniques of stripping the fly, moving the rod tip, not moving the rod tip under the water, rod tip above the water, floating line, sink tip, full sink. There's great places within an hour or 2 hour drive to do that. You've got all your good smallmouth water in the spring. There's lots and lots of places around. So the tailwaters down in Tennessee and North Carolina,
Yeah.
the Watauga, there's a lot of guides down there that'd be happy to have somebody that can throw a streamer in their boat to fish those higher flows and not watch a bobber all day. There's tailwaters to the north too. We've got the North Branch of Potomac up on the West Virginia-Maryland line. It's
pretty cool one.
Great option. If you go a little further north, get up into the Little Juniata. That's bigger trout water, floatable trout water.
Yep.
It's a little mix of smallmouth in there too. Further north, the Delaware, up in kind of almost New York, Pennsylvania border. Delaware has some great, catch it on the higher flows, great streamer fishing.
Yeah.
So there's plenty of destinations without having to, I got to go to the Madison River in Montana to throw streamers because that's where Kelly does it. Hey, Kelly's the man on this stuff, but you can do this in a lot of places.
Yeah.
And he'll be the first to tell you that.
For sure.
The other part on these patterns is not just the pattern of the fly, it's also the color of the pattern. As you can see here, there's a lot of fairly neutral colors here, but there's some bright colors mixed in. Your yellows, your chartreuses, even some brighter whites, and pink even. Ideally, you're going to know the stream you're fishing. You're going to know what forage is available in it and what other species live in that stream. Are there white horse suckers? Are there red horse suckers? Are there fall fish? Are there lots of baby rainbows and browns? What is the colors of the larger fly, the larger baits that you would be imitating with these flies? As you see in there, there's kind of a lot of olive and white or olive and yellow. Those are great for imitating small brown trout, small rainbow trout. Throw a little hint of pink in there, throw a little hint of blue in there for your browns, a little hint of pink for your rainbows. Those are great colors for imitating that juvenile trout. Your tans and browns are generally going to be more of your chubs and fall fish and suckers that are juvenile as well. They're not full grown, but they're going to be more in that maybe olive, but mostly tans and browns and even rusty browns. And then sometimes you just want a bright, distinguishable fly, and that's where occasionally you're going to throw black with some hot pink in it. Because a black fly, there's really no fish that's black. A dark bluegill might be almost black occasionally, but Most of our freshwater fish here in Virginia and in the east, with the exception of some exotics down in Florida, just don't turn black
Right.
when they're young. Maybe a smallmouth when he gets old might turn back black, but he ain't in the food chain at that point.
No.
They're light green when they're young. The your suckers and your fall fish and your big sculpins, those are all generally in that tan to olive range, maybe a little bit of white. Those colors can be very important, but sometimes you got really stained water. You need a fly that is a dark, sharp, contrasting color. And black is a great example of that. Dead white is another great example of that.
Even just going into the condition of your day, like if you want to fish streamers on a bright sunny day, maybe not the best thing to do, but it could work, and it does.
Yeah.
White is a great pattern for a bright sunny day. If it's a nice dark day, just nothing but clouds in the sky, a dark pattern, just all black, is a great idea for that. And that goes for all
Small
the different,
streamers,
small
big streamers,
streamers,
it
big
doesn't matter.
streamers. And it doesn't have to be black, it doesn't have to be white. I guess you could do like all peach, all tan, all of a light color, all of a dark color.
Yeah. What I would say is have a range.
Yeah.
Have a range from light to dark, and understand that conditions can dictate. Now, sometimes it can be gin clear water on a bright sunny day and a black fly is what they want.
Yep.
I've had that happen. But generally speaking, that's not going to be the case.
Right.
It's going to be a lighter colored fly. It's going to be a tan or a white. Something that's not glaring and obvious.
Right.
So, but have a range. Have a range of shapes, have a range of colors, have a range of sizes. Last year on the white, I did this same trip. We got kind of suckered by the dam. The week before, 44, 46 degree water coming from the dam. The week of, 36 to 38 degree water coming from the dam. Kind of put everybody in a foul mood fish-wise. They were kind of cold shocked and did not want to eat. But we had some incredible eats. They were mostly late in the day on a falling high water, and they were mostly in pretty clear water, and they were almost without a doubt on olive and white.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit of chartreuse blended in there in the olive, but it was really that light green and white contrast in the fly that worked. It was more natural, and in that colder setting, I think more natural really works. We jumped that water temperature back up into the mid 40s, high 40s. Maybe it wouldn't have mattered as much.
Right.
It could have been tan, could have been yellow.
Yeah. I think that kind of covers just our general breakdown of colors, right? So I think you want to move into questions?
Yeah, let's. You had a couple of good questions.
I've got two. We talked about this a little bit, but we'll go into it a little more. How about guidance on what sizes of streamers can be cast on different line weights?
Depends on how good a caster you are.
Right.
If you're really good at loading the rod and understanding the dynamics of the cast, you can throw a 6-inch streamer on a 6-weight. I wouldn't recommend throwing a 6-inch streamer with dumbbell eyes on a 6-weight, ever. Don't care how good a caster you are. But an unweighted, bulkier, brush head or something like that is certainly doable on a 6-weight. You're going to cast it better on a 7 or an 8. So generally when I'm looking at a 6-weight as being that 3 to 5 inch fly, a 7-weight being that 4 to 6 inch fly for the average caster, an 8-weight being that 5 to 8 inch fly for the average caster, and a 9 through 11 weight would be your 9-inch and above flies. When we get into musky flies that are 13, 14 inches long, with an 8/0 hook in the front and a 6/0 in the middle, that fly is just so bulky that you need an 11 weight to move it through the air. You need a lot of line mass to move that fly through the air.
Right.
And once you get it moving, you better have a finger on that line as it's running out on the chute, because it could go in the trees.
I'd say you also should have a good idea of where that fly is behind you when you're casting.
And the cast, this trouty up over the head cast is going to bury a hook in the back of your head.
Yeah.
Out to the side. You're always keeping that fly out to the side of you. It's almost a Belgian style cast.
It's pretty close.
It's even with a 4 or 5 inch long fly, you're almost bringing that fly up and back and then over, but never back to the inside of the rod.
It's a narrow oval motion.
Yes.
Yeah.
And all fly casts are a narrow oval motion.
Yeah.
But a lot of times when we're trout minded, we're more in that up and out. And if you're doing that with bigger streamers with articulate, even if it's a 3.5 inch sex mini dungeon, you're going to end up with a fly in the back of your ear or the back of your head.
Yeah.
It's going to happen. You got to get out of that over the head, tomahawk chop, whatever you want to call that cast. You got to get out of that mindset. You've got to get out to the side.
There are times where I like it not for streamers. But man, I just don't cast like that. I really use that Belgian style or that narrow oval all of the time.
Yeah. I mean, there can be times where you're doing this. I mean, if I'm running 15 feet off of a bank,
steeple,
I'm just flipping that streamer up in the air and smacking it back down.
Yeah.
That's really the only time you're doing that straight up and down cast.
And in this idea, this straight up and down, you really mean straight up and down. That's really what we mean. It is not that 10-2. It is up in the air. Your rod is pointing straight up, maybe a little bit.
You're not even stripping that fly.
No.
You're smacking it into that pocket, maybe popping the rod tip once or twice, and you're putting it in the next pocket.
Exactly. You want the next one?
Yeah, let's go ahead.
All right. I like this one. I think we could easily go really far in on this. What characteristics should you look for in a streamer? Also, I know the gentleman who asked me this question. We were talking about the game changers are ready for you, so I left that part of the question off. I feel like we kind of already answered it. So what characteristics should you look for in a streamer?
I'm looking for, I like the jerkbait style streamers.
Yes.
I'm looking for a bulky head, very dense, so that it pushes some water, some vibration. Lateral lines are important on all these fish. It helps them find stuff. Browns have a more sensitive lateral line than rainbows. So, they feel things further away through the water. So any amount of vibration I can get from that fly, that ripple effect pushing it through the water, I really like. So I like that bulkier head to a smaller tail section. I like the brush head style flies. Alex Lafkas has kind of put that style out on the market, where you can use an articulated tail shank for that feather tail, or you can lash your shank down onto and extend off of the bend of your rear hook. If you use an articulated shank off of that rear hook, you're going to get more swimming motion during the retrieve and a longer, rounder kick on the paws. If you lash that long shank onto the top of that rear hook and extend, you've got a stiff platform off of that rear hook. You're going to get more of a center kick, a harder, quicker kick with that fly, and you'll still get some, so you're always going to get some swimming motion of that tail because you got a bulky head up front pushing water. It's never pushing dead even, so it's always going to be giving you some swim.
Yeah.
But you'll get less swim with that shank on the hook versus a shank off the back of the hook.
Right.
But both of those, I tie most of my streamers in those two styles, where I've got a front hook direct lashed with wire or heavy mono to the rear hook, and then I either have a separate tail shank on the back to give me more swimming motion, or a lashed on shank onto that rear hook to give me a stiffer tail, less swimming motion but more kick.
Right. I don't think I can add to that. I couldn't agree with you more.
You know, and tying big flies, it's just different. You know, you'd asked me that question 10 years ago, and I would have looked at you like blank eyes because I really wasn't doing that. You know, just wasn't part of, you know, I fished streamers, but I fished single hook,
Yeah.
you know, 2 to 3 inch flies. Caught a lot of good fish on those flies. But really, this whole articulated multi-hook fly has really exploded in the last 20 years.
It really has. And I mean, I'm the same way. When I started fishing streamers, I still being young. It was a big bugger. It was a zonker. It was just single hook patterns.
Yeah.
I just didn't know about it. And I don't know when I did learn about it, but
Once you do, it's addictive.
yeah, I don't.
You end up with boxes that look like this, and this is just one of several that has, you know, a couple $100 worth of, you know, easily a couple $100 worth of flies in it. You know, close to $500 worth of flies in a box like that, because
It's a lot of material.
those are 45-minute to an hour ties. And it's a lot of bucktail. It's a lot of big schlappen feathers. It's a lot of getting the right placement so those feathers sit properly.
Yeah.
So that tail works properly. Sometimes it's taking it apart and trying it 2 or 3 different times before you get it to sit the way you want it to.
Yeah.
So it's not exactly, you know, it's not rocket science. Anyone who can tie flies can tie these flies, but it's not a fast-paced fly.
Yeah.
It's not a simple nymph pattern that you can knock out a dozen an hour at all.
Yeah. It's not two materials, you know.
No. So the platform for the fly to me is important. I do use some game changer style really swimmy flies, but I don't tie a lot of them.
No.
They take even longer to tie, and there's so much more trimming involved, and you don't want me cutting your hair. You're going to look bad. Anything that requires me to trim a shape is going to look bad.
All right. I think that's the end of the questions I've got. I don't think we have any more for today. Let's see. So you're going out of town. I don't think our next episode will be until March.
Toward the end of the first week of March, I think is when we'll be filming the next episode.
We'll be filming again towards the end of the first week of March. So that kind of brings our
first 6
streamers part 2 to a close. And you have anything you want to add?
I'll let you guys know how it goes.
Yeah, we'll let you know how it goes.
You know, big streamer fishing is kind of like big game hunting.
Yeah.
You're not always successful. And even when you are successful, it's not always the giant that you wanted.
We're trophy hunting now.
We're trophy hunting. And there's nothing wrong with an 18 to 20 inch brown anywhere. I love them, but when there's 30 inch browns available and you catch 5 23 inch browns, it was a successful trip, but it wasn't the successful trip.
I think, now with this style of streamer becoming so popular, and with social media and trout related content and fishing related content where it is in this time, we forget a little bit that a 20-inch trout is a big trout.
It is a big trout.
I know we're seeing 30s online. Believe me, we all want to catch one, but that might be a fish of a lifetime.
The only couple of 30-inch class fish that I've ever caught in the trout world were lake run fish in New York and Pennsylvania and Ohio.
Yeah.
And they were caught on smaller streamers or egg patterns.
Yep. Yeah. It's not always about the streamers, but for this episode it is.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to finish it up for us. And thank you, everybody, for watching. You can find us here at 323 West Main Street in Waynesboro, Virginia. You're welcome to stop in, pick
Yep.
up some streamers.
Yeah, let us know if you want to go out and float the river, float the Jackson for trout, throw some streamers out there, do some nymphing, or smallmouth.
Yeah.
You know?
We're starting to get phone calls. So if there is any interest in guide trips,
the calendar is starting to fill in.
it is starting to fill in for our spring season, even February, because we're starting to get a little bit nicer weather. So, yeah.
Yeah, definitely call us as soon as you can.
Yeah. All right. Yep. Thank you, everybody, for watching, and we will see you in the next one in March. Thank you.